Come on,
No.
come on, movie.
I'm slapping the microphone.
Hey guys, welcome to Suspenders of Belief. I'm Heavy.
And I'm Treby.
And tonight, we watched Facing the Giants.
We went into this with relatively low, very cynical expectations, but we were wrong.
To be fair, our whole idea with the Suspenders of Belief was not supposed to be about religious belief at all. The idea was just like, when a film takes you on a journey, sometimes it asks you a little too much to be like, that's pushing it a little too far. And I think our expectations with this film were so, it's going to be so preachy, it's going to be trying to save the sinners, you're burning in hellfire, you got to convert the non-believers. Like, we were expecting this to be the absolute extreme end of a Christian trying to convert people film. And it was shockingly so competent, and it was bizarrely well acted. Like, I couldn't believe how well acted it was. It did have kind of a lower budget feel, like it could have been a made-for-TV movie, absolutely, but not to the film's discredit. It really felt like a passion project. And as I was paying attention to the credits, you've got the producer, the writer, and the main star, Alex Kendrick, all the same person. So this story really was a passion film. And this is something like The Room, for instance, where Tommy Wiseau was doing all of those parts. This is the exact far end spectrum of what you can do when you truly believe in your project. But what was this movie about?
This movie is about a high school football coach in a small town in, I think, Athens, Georgia. It's a losing team. They don't win a whole lot of games. And the character's kind of at the end of this rope at the beginning of the movie, where everybody wants to fire him. They don't think he's doing a very good job coaching. He's also doesn't have a whole lot of money. His house has problems. He doesn't have a very good car. He's trying to conceive a baby with his wife, and they can't quite do that. He's just having a lot of issues. And basically, through kind of a reintroduction to his faith. It's not, the movie doesn't posit that he's an atheist or anything like that. They're not converting him cold. Like, he believes in God at the beginning of the movie. But through kind of rediscovering his faith, he's able to turn all this around in what I think is a pretty satisfying way.
As we were watching it, I kept thinking in the back of my head, like, this has got to be like a film that they've made several films of. This was not somebody's first attempt at filmmaking. There's too much that works. There's too much natural dialogue that feels organic. There's too much where the pacing is real quick, and the quick editing and the nice shots, and we don't waste time, and we're not here to stretch it out. It feels like every scene is there to progress the story. The little setups all have payoffs, from the person who's coming by the school to pray for the students to the moment he has with the coach himself, the way that the coach uses that line to tell another coach later that it's all part of the plan. Like, very tight script. The film even does a couple of subverting your expectations in really satisfying ways, and I'm usually one of the biggest complainers about that, because subverting your expectations is kind of a cheap way to add some suspense or add some drama to a film.
Sometimes it's just lazy too. It's just, we didn't write a thing, we subverted your expectations.
You know, it's a Christian-based film. You're like, okay, well, when we know that the personal dramas of this coach are that he's on a losing team, okay, well, they're going to win. That's the big expectation. Well, then they lose the playoff game, so they can't advance. Once they lose the playoffs, they're out of the running. They can't go for state. And it's not just a real quick, they lost, and then like, they start walking away from the field, and the way that last play didn't count due to technicality, and they get one more shot at it. There's a scene of the coaches being like, all right, I'm cleaning up the uniforms, getting everything prepped for next season.
Ain't been a bad year.
Got all the jerseys?
All 32 of them. I ain't ready to put them up, though. I'm ready to go another round.
You and me both. Part of me wanted to get to state.
They let you settle with that loss for a little while. Eventually, they do have the technicality and get the chance to move on. But that rug pull is satisfying in the moment because it doesn't feel like it went the way you expected. It really felt like, this movie did kind of diverge. And then you get a second one with the expectation of, he's trying to have a child with his wife, and they haven't been able to conceive. And then she goes to the clinic, and even the nurses are like, it's that lady again. I really hope she's pregnant this time. And then they get the paperwork, and it's like negative. And you get that moment like Up, where it's kind of quiet, and we're just kind of like watching from a distance as she has to give her this bad news, and she's processing with it. And she's, out of her car, and she's like, you know what? I still love you, God. I still have faith. And it's just this soft, tender moment with the character of like, you know what? Even at her lowest point of her personal journey, like, she just wants to have this baby. It's like, you know what? I'm still not pregnant, but I'm not going to be angry about it. Like, I'm still going to have my faith.
Yeah.
It was a nice little character journey.
I wanted to give it a little bit of credit for having those teeth, because I thought that, they're not going to win, because the point is that they have faith, that the faith will help them persevere through whatever kind of hardships they endure. I didn't want it to be too obvious of, we're rewarded literally, tangibly, in a worldly way for having faith. I felt like that kind of subverts the message a little bit. But it's also a movie, and you've got to end it well enough and satisfying for your audience and stuff like that. So I'm willing to forgive that. But I was really ready to praise it. She's not going to conceive. I was shocked. And then they double back and they're like, no, she really does. She's going to have a baby. It's like, oh, okay, fine. You got me, movie. You got me.
What was super satisfying about that moment, too, was our completely opposite reactions, because I was crushed. I really felt for this poor lady. It was like, this is her whole objective, this whole film, because the house sucks, the car sucks, and, like, they slowly start making their lives a little bit better as the movie kind of goes through it. But, like, having the baby is, like, obviously she's wanted this for years. This is not a sudden impulse of, like, what if I became a mom? Like, she's wanted it for a long time.
Yeah, they said 4 years they were trying to conceive.
Right, so for it to be a victory for her, I was genuinely heartbroken when it was like that last of like, nope, still not pregnant. It was like, oh, that really hurt. And so while you were like, you know what, I'm impressed, this movie's not giving her that baby, and then I was just like, my soul, it hurts.
Right.
And then the switcheroo came where it's like, oh, that was the wrong person's test results. Presumably it was all kind of done like in a physical made, like it wasn't really, it was shown, not told, which I tend to prefer in a film anyways. But whenever she does get the happy news, it's great because we're not explicitly told it till the very end of the film.
Yeah.
And even the way that the wife goes about telling her husband is pretty satisfying, because it's like this person really thought about how she would tell her husband.
There's a lot about this that is, like you said, is surprisingly competent. I was thinking that I think all the comedy lands, or at least it did for me. I have a little bit of a background with community theater, so I'm used to being involved or watching productions where it's like, maybe this is the only actor we could get. They're not necessarily that great, but they can pull off the scene. And this has a lot of feels like that, or has a lot of moments that feel like that, where it's like, this actor's not great, but they're doing a pretty good job. They're doing not bad for what is likely a very low budget, and it's just whoever they could get, and it's fine. And most of the writing functions well enough for like setting up the jokes. Like there's the bit where they're in the locker room where you mentioned that scene where they realize that they lost the playoffs, they're not going to go to the championship, but they're having a little bit back and forth where they're like misinterpreting words, and it's fantastic. It's pretty funny because every time we get a word wrong, I'm like, I know the bit they're doing here, but I've never seen it done quite this way, and it's pretty good. Like it's pretty solid throughout. So it's there's a lot of that in this movie where I'm like, you know what, not bad. I have to give you a little applause, because like that functioned just fine for something that I thought was going to be very cheap and very obvious and I guess petty, or I can't think of the right word, but I just thought that it wouldn't function nearly as well, and it did.
Well, a lot of the dialogue felt very natural. And again, I don't know how much of it's improvised or how much of it's just a really competently written script, but there's a great moment, probably the best scene of the film, where he's trying to inspire kind of the quarterback of the team, where he's like, you're the most important figure on this team. If you've already given up, then the rest of everyone else on this team is already going to have given up. You have to believe that we can succeed, or otherwise you are letting every other player down. I need you to have faith that we can do this. I need you to believe in yourself. And it's a really powerful scene where he has to drag another student across a football field carrying him blindfolded on his back, and the coach is just pushing him. Don't give up. You gotta keep pushing. I know it hurts. I know it hurts. You can do it. Don't give up. Give me your best. You promise me your best, your very best. It's a powerful scene, even without the religious aspects taken into it. It's a very good scene. But then it's punctuated at the very end by the kid who's carried on his back, where he's like, "Coach, I weigh 160," and it's just fantastic because it's such a high school petty thing to care about. The coach said he weighed 140, and that hurt his pride. Like, no, coach, I weigh 160. It's just fantastic. And there's a lot of little character moments like that where the people feel real. It doesn't feel like you're doing a Quentin Tarantino where you have to have characters saying witty banter. A lot of it just feels organic and feels like these people are just having conversations about life. It doesn't feel too preachy. It doesn't feel like it's too much of an agenda set up. It just feels real.
That scene that you're talking about where he hauls that kid across the football field is a great, I guess, microcosm for the whole movie, because it functions just fine. You understand it. It's inspiring. It's set in the framework of football. But what he's doing isn't winning a football game. What he's doing is to do with training for football, sure, and it's literally in a football field, but you can grasp it without understanding football or caring about football at all. And the motivation is religious, sure, but in that moment, it's just about that coach believing in him and just pushing him and being there with him. He gets down on the ground and is crawling with him. It's all something that functions perfectly well without any of the framework. You get it. It's almost universal, and that's kind of the movie. It's in the framework of a football coach and a football team having to win a championship, but there's very little football in it, I would argue, despite the cover, despite everything else about it. Like, it doesn't lean as heavily into it as something like Varsity Blues did.
And even just the football element of it, where that was something we talked about with the resolution of Varsity Blues, is how important is it that the team wins. And at the end of Varsity Blues, they had already pushed the coach out of the game, so win or lose, they were playing by their own terms. So that was already kind of satisfying. So they could have lost it, and it wouldn't have had quite the feel-good message message that you have from The Win, sure. But this film, arguably, they needed to win, because the whole film, they've been losers, right? The coach is going to get run out of town. They're trying to get rid of his job. They're trying to pass off the assistant coach to step up to be the new coach. And he's writing the line about not knowing what side to be on. And the coach has this great moment between the two of them where he's like, you need to decide, what side of the fence you're on. And he's not mad at him about the fact that other people approached him to replace him, as much as it is like, you just need to pick a side and stop riding the fence. And it was just great. I love the control of that character. The only real scene where the coach actually gets genuinely mad is where he talks about the apathy and how the people are not playing with any heart. And this has before to do with any of the preachy religious messages at all. It just has to do with how they're approaching their life and how they're not trying. And again, it's one of those moments that it felt earned. It didn't feel like Varsity Blues, where every time the coach talks, he's screaming or he's disappointed or like he's acting as though you're letting him down. It was a genuine moment of frustration.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm open to watching more Alex Kendrick movies. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I was more inspired by this than anything we saw in Varsity Blues. It reminded me a lot of Rudy. I kept calling back to that because Rudy is about a relatively small in stature guy who has a huge heart. And that's kind of the point. Like, he wants to play football and he's such a small guy, but he has so much faith and so much confidence that it's inspiring. And that's kind of the point. And there's a lot of religious presence in that movie as well, but it's done way more subtly than this movie. But this movie, I mean, it's definitely a big part of it. But the word I kept coming back to while we were watching was gentle. Everything about this is kind of a gentle tone. It's kind of a gentle version of Christianity where they're not beating you over the head with it. They don't make any necessarily like full-on conversions in the movie. They don't, show us like, oh, here's a homosexual character and they die or anything like that. It never gets that heavy. You never have anybody having like sex out of wedlock and they don't have anything to say about that. It's all just about faith, almost an underlying element of faith and perseverance and trusting in God despite all the obstacles that you're faced. And that's basically what it's about. And it's something about that I feel is universal regardless of how you feel religiously.
And what I liked about it was the film had a nice way of faith-inspiring faith in a subtle sort of way that felt believable, because the most pushy you'd get about converting would be a son who's disrespectful to his father, and the coach is put off by it, and it's like, you know what, you should honor your father, you should be respectful to him. You can't control what type of person he is, but it's your responsibility to control the type of person you are. And this little message the coach has with this student, and really gets to him, and so he has this tender moment with his dad. I'm sorry, I'm gonna honor you, and I'm gonna be a better son, basically is what he's confessing to his dad. And then even like the coworker who his dad is with is like, I'll be totally honest, I would love if my son said something like that to me. And it really gets to the dad, and then you get a nice little payoff where obviously that character, whatever business, financial, real estate job that he has plenty of money, so everyone knows that the coach has an absolutely garbage car. It's a reoccurring point in the movie where it keeps dying, it's broken, its windows don't work, and it's just falling apart. So at a certain point he buys him a new car. This is nice because it wasn't just like the town pitched in and bought you a vehicle. This was set up as like a very personal connection that he made that inspired a child to be a better person, and that inspired the father to give back. And it was full circle, and it was a nice, and that's what I feel about the whole film. It didn't waste time. It did not waste your time. Every scene felt deliberate.
It's very heavily leaned into the religious element of it, but I'd almost describe this movie as wholesome more so than religious. You can go into this and get something out of it, and you don't have to be a Christian, I think, to appreciate it. So it's really very well done. So much of the stuff is set up, some of it is very tight and very carefully structured. I didn't look at his filmography, so I don't know how many movies he had made up to this point. This is 2006, I think. It's been a minute, but I'd be curious to see more of his content for sure, because this is really well done.
Absolutely. I know that we're still doing the sports ball month, and I don't think he probably did more than one sports ball movie. It's possible, but my thought was we should close out the month with something of quality. So I'm gonna let you choose. Where do we go after this?
I kind of want to do Rocky because that is one of my favorite movies. Even though I'm not a sports-oriented person, I really do respect and appreciate so much in that movie that has nothing to do with boxing. And that's kind of what I want to lean towards.
All right then, next time on Suspenders of Belief, Rocky.